Okay, so we looked at the introduction part of OD. What did we look at? The definition. We looked at the key elements of OD, objectives of OD, growth and importance of OD, the importance. Then we looked at the historical part of OD. So today is chapter 2. We look at what is known as planned change. So you might be asking why planned change? There are different types of change, but if you remember correctly, I said OD deals with the change that is deliberate, that is planned. There are some changes that happen in the organization that are accidental, but this one we're not looking at accidental changes. We're looking at change that you actually plan it deliberately. Okay? So that's what OD basically deals with, organization development. That's what OD basically deals with, is to do with a change that is deliberately planned. Yeah, so on this topic, what we're basically going to focus on is on looking at the theories of planned change. Okay? So the theories are the ones that are going to also help us to understand how we can basically plan this particular type of change. Okay? So however, this planned change happens in organizations because probably we want to solve a specific problem, we want to learn from experiences, yeah, or simply because we want to adapt to the changes of the world, of the environment, or want to improve in terms of performance. Okay? Because if you remember correctly how we defined OD, it's something to do with effectiveness. You remember it? So how we can make an organization to be effective can be through solving the problems that we're facing. Can we learn through the mistakes that we have made? Can we adapt to the changes of the environment? How best also can we continuously also improve it? Yeah, because an organization, even though you are succeeding, but doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. So that's where, again, we are saying that by doing that, we are also increasing in terms of the level of effectiveness of the organization. So that's just as an introduction, but what we are going to focus on is to talk about the theories of planned change. So these are the theories of change that we are basically going to look at. So there are three types of models that we are going to look at. So number one is what is known as the Lewin's change model. Then we'll look at the action research model, and then we'll also look at the positive model. So these are the main models that we're basically going to discuss. So we have the Lewin. Lewin change model. Then we have the action research model. And then, as I've said, we have also what is known as the positive model. So all these models are basically looking at the issues to do with the change. So as I've said, they are basically theories of change. So we look at each one of these theories. However, maybe you might be familiar when it comes to Lewin change model. Anyways, you will tell me if it's something that you're not familiar with. So Lewin's model is basically a three-step model which basically looks at unfreezing, looking at movement or change itself, and then we are looking at refreezing. So this model is according to Lewin. So that's the first model that we are basically going to emphasize on. Okay. So we have what is known as unfreezing, then we have what is known as movement, and then we have what is known as unfreezing. Okay. So it is a three-step model. Actually, other books refer to basically as as the three-step model. So this model is according to a guy known as Lewin. So his first name is Kurt Lewin. Yeah, so he's the one who introduced this particular change. Okay. So what he's looking at is that this model simply illustrates that if we want to change a specific situation, or if we want to bring in change, which we're simply looking at that as movement, is that first of all, we have to unfreeze. Yeah? So I'll give an example of unfreezing, because of the sounds by the ice. Let's say ice, I shape a box. Little front of Saint would have carried around. Senegal in Bari and Woman would have carried around. Show me the value to Musungu. Yes? To the Musungu, because we are not turning around. The Gumpaka Sajan. The Rabbi have shape in Marurani. Yeah. So you can take that example. For example, that you want to model a specific iceberg, that it is in a shape that you don't want it to be in that shape. So take that iceberg like as if it is an organization. So first of all, what we are saying is that we have to unfreeze. So the unfreezing process is where you are trying to also communicate with your employees or the people of the organization the reasons why change is needed or change is required. Okay? So, what it means is that how can people accept that there is need to change? Because remember, according to Kurt Lewin, says that every change results into two types of forces. And what are these two types of forces? It results into either a driving force, and it describes that as the status quo. And we have what is known as the restraining force. So any change that you bring in an organization will result into two forces. So what do we mean? We mean that any change that is happening in the organization, one, there is one reason why it is driving the change in HGD. Alright? There is a reason why as an organization they are being driven to say this change is necessary for the organization. So those forces or those factors, we're basically looking at them as what? Driving forces. So many issues can be, maybe you're not making profits, you're not effective, you're not efficient, the level of service even in terms of quality maybe is compromised. Such kind of factors are forcing the organization to bring in what? Change. Those reasons and justifications that an organization has to say, no, we have to change as an organization are known as driving forces. But now, as an employee, because the way how we work in an organization, eventually what we do in that organization becomes as a what? As a culture. And you and I understand that culture is something that is very difficult to break. And that's one of the reasons why employees will basically restrain, denying that the change should what? Should happen. So that's why we're saying that any change that you bring in an organization, according to Kurt Lewin, is saying that it results into two opposing forces. So as you can see the arrows, so what we're saying is that if the force is equal, when the force is equal, what it will mean is that the organization will have the same what? Position. So this position, Kurt Lewin looks at it as what is known as the status quo. Status quo, current what? Situation. So what we are saying is that we don't want to be here. We want to move this one to somewhere here. But how is it that going to happen? Because either we are going to increase the driving force or we are going to reduce in terms of the what? Restraining force. But now, sometimes what may happen is that if you increase the driving force, you find what also the restraining force is also what? Increasing. So it's just the same like a tug of war. What is a tug of war? Tug of war. So so that's what even happens with change in the organization. So what are we saying? So if we have to change things, it's either we increase the restraining force, yes, it will change, but it will change backward, or we increase the driving force, it will go forward. But what we are saying is that in most cases, if you increase the driving force, what will happen is that the people also will increase in terms of the what? The restraining force. So if it was you, what would you do in order to make sure that the change should still happen? Because if we are saying that by increasing the driving force, it will simply increase the restraining force. So what are we going to do to make sure that eventually the change should happen in the organization?
Okay, there might be some elements which makes the restraining force to be increasing, so we might eliminate them.
Okay. So the issue is you have to find a way of how you are going to what? Minimize this force. If you minimize this, then eventually it becomes easy. Yes, because you have minimized in terms of the what? The restraining force. But if you want to force things by just increasing the driving force, then you are going to be met with a lot of resistance. And sometimes one of the reasons is people are resisting, they have their own what? Reasons. So what it requires you as a manager is to make sure that you understand why is it that people are restraining, and make sure that you are offering them that in order to minimize in terms of the restraining what? Force. Maybe people are restraining because they are scared that they are going to lose their what? Their jobs. So can you give them assurance to say no, you're not going to lose your what? Your jobs. If you do that, then definitely the people will minimize in terms of their what? Restraining force. Okay? So any change that happens in the organization, it results into these two forces. Yeah, so that is according to Kate Levin. So he's saying that the only way is to unfreeze, and then we'll bring in this change, and then finally we'll have to refreeze. So let's look at these three steps probably in a little bit more detail, so that you can also take down some few notes for you to remember. So let's start with step one, where we're talking about unfreezing. So step number one on unfreezing. So this step usually involves reducing those forces maintaining the organization's behavior. This step usually involves reducing those forces maintaining the organization's behavior. Maintaining the organization's behavior at its present level. At its present level. At its present level. First, I'll continue. By introducing information that shows the difference. By introducing information that shows the difference between the desired and the actual. Between the desired and the actual. Desired and the action. Employees can be motivated to engage in change activities. Employees can be motivated to engage in change activities. To engage in change activities. So what are we saying? Sometimes Andromagana change is because of lack of information. They don't understand the reason why we need to what? To change. So by providing information or introducing information, what you are doing is so that they should understand. So what is it that we are saying? We will rather show them what is the desired and the actual in terms of performance of the organization. Believe it. All right. Yeah. So what we are saying is that the desire, I mean, if not the fee in the air, we need 5 million sales. That's our target. But we're going to figure in the air, and we are only achieving 2 million. This shows that there is a what? There is a gap. Right? Yes. But sometimes for people to know that this gap exists is only if you tell them and you communicate and you provide that particular what? Information. And that's what we're trying to say, is that by introducing information to show the difference between the desired, anybody? So because of that, that's why we're saying that then if you indicate to this to the people, to the employees, that's when yes, it's necessary for us to what? To change. So we might be saying, okay, University of Lilongwe, our target in terms of enrollment, we should have 1,000 students. Number very example. Yeah, but actual on the ground right now, we say we may be till the 400. So we are now saying, no, gentlemen, we have to change how we do business. But people are resisting change because they don't know the reasons why, what is making you for the organization to introduce this particular change. So what we are saying is that, can you communicate? Provide the information. Why are we changing, so that they can understand? So if they understand, it is able, now they will be able to participate in the whole change what? Activity. It's the same way that we have also said here that they are restraining. Sometimes what is it that people are refusing change? Is because again, it's just fear of what? Unknown. Kunguopa basi. Usizora kuopa jane. Sinto zisinte sinto kuzoti jijiri ndani. Fuel alawa sali chusera, mina housing alawa sali chusera, mina mabwera nzungu muzite. You know, all things, speculations that people create in their mind. Yeah? So those speculations that we are talking about are the ones that can sometimes create in the employee's mind in terms of fear of the word unknown. So one way of also removing this fear of the unknown, the key element to neutralize this is communication. Because if you communicate why we are changing, then people will also understand that, okay, Ababa is really necessary for us to what? To change. And that's what exactly we're talking about in terms of unfreezing the situation. So that Asakari too stubborn, Asakari too rigid, no, we don't want to change. We need to be akwifure. So good akwifure abanga and freeze. You need to communicate. That's what we are saying. Have you understood? Yes. Then step number two is the one that we're talking about in terms of movement. So a little notes there again on movement for you to remember is that this step shifts the behavior of the organization. This step shifts the behavior of the organization, department, or individuals to a new level. This step shifts the behavior of the organization, department, or individual to a new level. Full stop, continue. It involves developing new behavior. It involves developing new behaviors It involves developing new behaviors, values, and attitudes. Through changes in the organizational structure and processes. Through changes in the organizational structure and processes. So, per movement, it means now we're bringing in what? We're implementing the change. The change is happening. And that's what we were saying, that new behavior, new value, new what? Attitudes. Okay? So the actual change is basically happening at the stage where we're talking about as movement. But before that happens to implement, what we are saying is, first of all, we have to what? Unfreeze. Yeah, yes. Communication is the way how we can basically unfreeze a certain situation. Number 3 is basically to refreeze, as we have looked at that 3-step model. Look at that stuff. Right. Yeah, so the next step number 3 is basically refreezing. Yeah. So what it means to refreeze? This step stabilizes the organization. Stabilizes the organization at a new state. At a new state. It includes supporting mechanisms such as reinforcement, So last time we did explain briefly what reinforcement is, yeah? No?
Encourage.
Yes. So there are 2 types of reinforcement, negative and what? Positive, right? Yes. So either you give rewards or you give what? Punishment. If somebody is doing something wrong, you give them a punishment. If they're doing the right thing as agreed, then you give them a reward. Yeah. So yes, we need to encourage. So in other words, the only way to refreeze a situation is by empowering, encouraging, and that's what we are looking at it as refreezing. Okay? So whether you introduce rewards, specific structures, a specific culture on how things are going to be done, that is one way of what? Refreezing the situation. Okay? So according to Kate Lewin, that is his model of change.